Saturday and Sunday nights at 9:30 on the BBC News Channel.
So I am today announcing that I will resign as leader of the Conservative and Unionist Party on Friday the 7th of June, so that a successor can be chosen.
After intense pressure, Theresa May lays out a timetable for her departure as Prime Minister, saying it's with deep regret she didn't deliver Brexit, but now was the time to go.
I do so with no ill will, but with enormous and enduring gratitude to have had the opportunity to serve the country I love.
There were immediate tributes from rivals, with a new Conservative leader and Prime Minister due in number 10 by the end of July.
The Prime Minister's put her heart and soul into trying to do the best for this country at a difficult time, facing a challenging climate in Parliament.
A little later, Mrs May left Downing Street, but her departure from number 10 for good changes nothing, says Labour, saying it's the country that should decide who's Prime Minister.
I think we need a general election. We don't need another Tory leader installed by Tory MPs.
We'll be looking at who's in the running to be the next Prime Minister and how the process will work.
And we'll be getting a reaction from right across the country and Europe to today's events.
And coming up on BBC News, Celtic could win an unprecedented treble if they are victorious at Hampden this weekend. They face Hearts in the Scottish Cup final.
Good evening from Downing Street, where after much speculation and pressure from within her own party and the Cabinet, Theresa May laid out a timetable for her departure as Prime Minister. In an emotional speech here outside number 10, she said she'd done her best to deliver Brexit, and it was a matter of deep regret that she hadn't been able to deliver. Mrs May will step down on the 7th of June, resigning as Conservative leader but staying on as a caretaker Prime Minister until her party chooses her successor. That contest to replace her will begin 3 days later, on the 10th of June, with Tory MPs selecting 2 candidates and the winner being voted in by party members. Now that result is expected by the end of July, with a successful candidate becoming Britain's new leader. Well, Mrs May said it had been the honour of her life to serve as Prime Minister and warned her successor that he or she would need to compromise to see Brexit through. Our political editor Laura Kuenssberg reports now on the demise of the premiership of Theresa May.
It was time. Time to go to work, although the job has slipped away.
Good morning, lovely weather.
For confidants to choreograph the exit rather than plan the future. Time to confront the truth. A broken government, a broken leader. Time to forget distractions. The men in suits walk out. Then silence drops. As with every leader, it's lonely at the end. The cameras click just for them.
Ever since I first stepped through the door behind me as Prime Minister, I have striven to make the United Kingdom a country that works not just for a privileged few, but for everyone, and to honour the result of the EU referendum. I negotiated the terms of our exit and a new relationship with our closest neighbours that protects jobs, our security and our union. I have done everything I can to convince MPs to back that deal. Sadly, I have not been able to do so. I tried 3 times. I believe it was right to persevere, even when the odds against success seemed high. But it is now clear to me that it is in the best interests of the country for a new Prime Minister to lead that effort. So I am today announcing that I will resign as leader of the Conservative and Unionist Party on Friday the 7th of June.
Painful for her inner circle, after all the agony of trying to get Parliament on side, for someone else to try now.
It will be for my successor to seek a way forward that honours the result of the referendum. To succeed, he or she will have to find consensus in Parliament where I have not. Such a consensus can only be reached if those on all sides of the debate are willing to compromise.
But her efforts to deal first with her party, then Labour, came crashing down. With the country watching on, this inscrutable leader, human after all.
This country is a union. Not just a family of 4 nations, but a union of people, all of us. Whatever our background, the colour of our skin or who we love, we stand together. And together we have a great future. Our politics may be under strain, but there is so much that is good about this country. So much to be proud of. So much to be optimistic about. I will shortly leave the job that it has been the honour of my life to hold. The second female Prime Minister, but certainly not the last. I do so with no ill will, but with enormous and enduring gratitude to have had the opportunity to serve the country I love.
For so long, Theresa May fought and fought to hold on to her party, to hold on to her premiership. But that struggle is now exhausted. Her time in office nearly done.
There's no immediate exit. She'll stay till a new leader's chosen by the Tory party at the end of July. But who? Coy for now?
I find it moving, actually. I think that the Prime Minister's put her heart and soul into trying to do the best for this country at a difficult time facing a challenging climate in Parliament. And I know that the Prime Minister has always striven to do what she believes is best for this country.
The first cabinet minister in the race of rivals confirmed at a meeting in his constituency he'd run just a few hours later.
Her passion was to deliver the referendum result, the Brexit referendum result. That will now be someone else's responsibility, and whoever succeeds in doing that will know that she laid the foundations.
And no prizes for guessing who will also be one of a cast of maybe more than a dozen speaking at a conference in Switzerland today.
I do not wish to elaborate now on what we're going to do and how we're going to do it, but you will be, believe me, you will be hearing possibly more about that than you necessarily want to hear.
But they all know Tory Prime Ministers often depart Downing Street because of Europe.
It is a very big moment, a very sad moment, because she cared passionately about the job and about the country, and she wanted to serve the public just as I did. And when you come to that moment that you know your time is up, it's extremely hard to take.
Any of them would have to wrangle the same divided party. Eurosceptics ready to do almost anything to get their way.
Politicians have to make sure their words and their deeds match. That's very important.
So whose fault is this then? Her fault?
Well, wasn't it Harry Truman who had in his office the motto, "The buck stops here"? The buck always stops in Downing Street. It must do.
Someone has to answer these protesters' question. Where is the government? Who will lead?
There has to be another opportunity for the people of this country to decide who they want to be in their government, how they want the government to be run, what the long-term strategy is of that government. I think we need a general election.
Our politics' problems, though, won't disappear just with a new Tory leader.
I'm not sure her departure changes the fundamentals of Brexit. Brexit is an utter mess, and it looks to me like the only way to resolve that mess is to put the issue back to the people.
You cannot see power. You cannot touch power. But in this street you feel it profoundly when it has fallen away.
Laura, was there an inevitability about today, given the successive failure of her to get that deal through Parliament?
I think in the end there was, really. It's been coming for a long time, and when these moments finally occur, these moments of big drama in Downing Street, they always feel pretty brutal, and no one would question that Theresa May hasn't given this her utmost, hasn't tried and tried and tried. But politics isn't about how hard you try, it's about what you're actually able to do. And although Theresa May did try to point to some of her achievements today, whether changing the law on domestic violence or trying to change policy on housing, in the end she fell short by her own measures and has left behind a pretty toxic landscape when it comes to Brexit, and just has not been able to turn her attention to some of the other problems that she wanted to try to tackle in the country. And of course now we're left with this situation where a small group, around 100,000 people around the country, will pick the next Prime Minister, because of course it's not all of us who have a say, but the Tory party itself.
OK, Laura, many thanks. Laura Kuenssberg there, and you'll be joining us a little bit later on. Well, Theresa May rose to lead the Conservative Party with the decisive backing of her MPs after 6 years running the Home Office and a reputation for tough talking. A Remainer who became a cheerleader for Brexit. She won the praise of Leavers but suffered disaster at the ballot box after calling a general election and losing her majority. But ultimately, it was Brexit that led to her demise. Another Conservative leader toppled by the debate over Europe. Our chief political correspondent, Vicky Young, looks back at Theresa May's career in politics.
Theresa May rose to the top job at one of the most turbulent periods in British political history. After the UK's vote to leave the European Union, David Cameron dramatically resigned and she became the country's second female Prime Minister.
As we leave the European Union, we will forge a bold, new, positive role for ourselves in the world. And we will make Britain a country that works not for a privileged few, but for every one of us.
During her first months as Prime Minister, she was under constant pressure to lay out her approach to Brexit negotiations, but refused to give much away.
Brexit means Brexit, and we're going to make a success of it.
Becoming Prime Minister had been a long-held ambition. The daughter of a vicar, Theresa Brazier, as she then was mainly state-educated in Oxfordshire before studying geography at Oxford University. In her third year, she met her future husband, Philip. After graduating, Mrs May went to work in the city, but she saw her future in politics. She became a councillor in South London, and after standing for Parliament twice, she was elected the MP for Maidenhead in 1997. As party chairman, she made the case for Conservative modernisation, telling her party some hard truths during their years in opposition.
Our base is too narrow, and so occasionally are our sympathies. You know what some people call us? The nasty party.
Under David Cameron, she became the longest-serving Home Secretary of modern times. But as Prime Minister, she faced an even tougher challenge, trying to steer the UK and her party through Brexit. This most cautious of politicians became one of Westminster's biggest risk-takers.
I have concluded that the only way to guarantee certainty and stability for the years ahead is to hold this election and seek your support for the decisions I must take.
The gamble backfired. She lost the Conservatives their majority, only hanging on to power through a deal with the DUP. Her political misjudgment left her weakened, and reasserting her authority didn't always go according to plan. Her message during this important conference speech was lost amid a catalogue of interruptions, a prankster, a faulty set and persistent cough. After months of negotiations with Brussels, Mrs May agreed a withdrawal deal. But the compromise to avoid border checks on the island of Ireland wasn't one that many in her party or her partners in government, the DUP, could accept.
The ayes to the right, 202. The noes to the left, 432.
That was the first of 3 defeats in the Commons, and Mrs May was forced to ask the European Union for a delay to Brexit. Nigel Farage's new Brexit party surged in popularity and her colleagues finally moved against her. Theresa May never wanted Brexit to define her time in office, but it was the backdrop to everything her government did. She was praised for her tenacity and sense of duty, but critics said she lacked vision and regarded Brexit as a damage limitation exercise. Vicky Young, BBC News, Westminster.
Well, ultimately, the UK's next Prime Minister will be chosen by members of the Conservative Party, around 120,000 people. And that choice will determine the shape of Brexit and the future of the country. So, what's the membership's take on Mrs May's departure? Alex Forsyth has been at Reading University Conservative Association to gauge the mood of younger voters there.
Hitting younger voters has proved elusive at times for the Tories. These students are supporters and members of Reading University's Conservative Association. Theresa May is their patron. Many have campaigned alongside her. So what of her decision to step down?
I think it's a really sad day. I think she's tried her best for the country, and it's always sad to see someone forced out of office.
Anyone pleased to see her go?
Yes. For me, she should have gone after the election. She hasn't really listened or heeded advice from anyone else.
I think we need a new leader, a new direction, hopefully someone who can get the Brexit business finished once and for all so we can move on.
These young Tory members will vote in the upcoming leadership contest. Even here, views are divided.
For me, it has to be a Brexiteer because we've got to fight the Brexit Party.
The Brexit Party could potentially do very well at the expense of the Conservative Party.
Is that the consensus?
Yeah. No, I'd rather see sort of a middle ground. While Brexit should definitely take place, it has to be done in an effective way that is going to please, the most amount of people as possible.
I think there needs to be compromise.
The next generation of voters says a new approach is needed to keep the party relevant.
It has to be a real change of direction for the rest of young people to really come on board. Otherwise, we're just going to end up with the same result of, the older people voting for Conservative, young people just being disaligned with the cause.
We need someone that can come in and sell Conservative ideology and that is charismatic and outgoing. Theresa May hasn't been that. So for me, someone like Boris would be able to do that.
I don't know how you can say. I just think he's a bit of a clown. I think a lot of young people think that too.
They aren't sure any leader can easily overcome the Europe question.
I don't think it's possible, really. I think it's going to carry on no matter what until we leave.
While Brexit is really important, I think you then also need to look at the wider politics as a whole and actually have a plan for the future, not just right now.
Are you feeling optimistic or pessimistic about the party's prospects at this point?
Optimistic.
Optimistic. I'm more pessimistic. I think for any leader, they're not going to be able to get anything past Parliament.
The party will be fine. I mean, it's been through ups and downs through its whole history. It's quite a long history. So I think it will be fine no matter what.
That might depend on the next leader. Alex Forsyth, BBC News, Reading.
So, how does all this affect the political landscape in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland? Well, in a moment, we'll hear from Emma Vardy in Belfast and Sian Lloyd in Cardiff. But first, here's our Scotland editor, Sarah Smith.
Politicians here are, of course, trying to work out what a new Prime Minister will mean for Scotland. Nicola Sturgeon has wasted no time in arguing that a new Tory leader could strengthen the case for Scottish independence. She says the prospect of a hardline Brexiteer taking over, the prospect of the UK leaving the EU with no deal means it's all the more important that Scotland should get a choice about whether or not it wants to be an independent country. And that is exactly why Scottish Tories will want the next leader to do the same thing that Theresa May did, and that is to refuse to allow any further referendums on Scottish independence. The leader of the Scottish Conservatives, Ruth Davidson, says she will back a leadership candidate who is someone who shows their deep commitment to Scotland remaining part of the UK, and someone who's a unifier who could try and bring the whole country together.
Well, here in Northern Ireland, it was those issues thrown up by the Irish border that caused Theresa May the biggest problems in the Brexit negotiations that she never fully managed to overcome. And she never managed to persuade her supposed allies, Northern Ireland's Democratic Unionist Party, to support her deal. Now, that confidence and supply arrangement with the DUP, something the Nationalist Party Sinn Féin here have been very critical of, that arrangement is due to expire and will need renegotiating shortly after her successor takes up the role. Now, further south in the Republic of Ireland tonight, the Irish Prime Minister has said that Theresa May's resignation could potentially be very dangerous for Ireland, the country potentially most exposed to the effects of a hard Brexit, if a Eurosceptic candidate were to take on the role and potentially who could advocate a no-deal Brexit. So there is some nervousness in Ireland tonight and here in Northern Ireland, where a majority of people voted to remain in the EU, about who is going to step into Theresa May's shoes.
Here in Cardiff Bay, the Labour First Minister Mark Drakeford has said that a Conservative leadership campaign is the last thing that the country needs at this time. Now, many Welsh Conservative politicians have defended Theresa May's dedication, but there are calls for the party to come together to deliver the Brexit that the country voted for. Wales overall voted to leave the European Union, and there is a feeling that both the Conservatives and Labour here could feel the impact of a surge of support for the Brexit party when the results of the European elections are announced.
OK, Sian Lloyd, Emma Vardy and Sarah Smith, thanks to you all. Thank you. Now, Theresa May's departure has fired the starting gun on the race to replace her as Conservative leader and the country's Prime Minister. Now, initial jostling behind the scenes is now out in the open. Ben Wright has been looking at the leadership contenders.
The job of picking the next Prime Minister is in the hands of Tory MPs and Conservative Party members. A contest that has already been brewing for weeks will kick off officially on Friday, June the 7th, the date Theresa May will stand down as Tory leader. Nominations begin the following week. Under the party's rules, Conservative MPs will whittle down the field of candidates through a series of votes until a final two remain. And those two candidates will then battle it out to win a vote of the Tory grassroots. Around 120,000 Conservative Party members who are largely male, middle class and have an average age of 57. So, who might stand? Well, it's likely to be a very crowded field. Around 17 Tory MPs are considering a crack at number 10, and 5 have said that they'll definitely run, including Boris Johnson. The 54-year-old former Foreign Secretary is the likely front-runner. The figurehead of the Leave campaign is popular among the membership, but less admired by a chunk of Tory MPs who may try and thwart his path to number 10. Another Leave believer, Dominic Raab, is also likely to run, and the former Brexit Secretary is popular on the right of the party. There's the Environment Secretary, Michael Gove, who backed Leave but has stayed loyal to Mrs May. The Foreign Secretary, Jeremy Hunt, is going for it. He campaigned for Remain in the referendum but has since stressed his commitment to Brexit, as has the Home Secretary, Sajid Javid. The Leave supporter and former Work and Pension Secretary, Esther McVeigh, says she is definitely running. And Andrea Leadsom, who stood against Theresa May last time before pulling out, may also try again. There will be more, many more, who go for it. A new Prime Minister will be in place by the time that Parliament breaks up for the summer recess in late July. But whoever goes through this door in a few weeks' time will face the same challenges that Mrs May will soon leave behind. A deadlocked Parliament, a Brexit deal the EU says is closed, and a deeply divided country.
Ben Wright reporting there. Well, as he was saying, the next Prime Minister will face the same intractable problem as Theresa May, how to resolve the divisions of Brexit. And at the moment, and with no apparent majority in Parliament for any course of action. Today, the European Union said Mrs May's resignation did nothing to change its position on the withdrawal deal agreed with Britain. So, what next for Brexit? Our Deputy Political Editor John Pienaar has more.
Everyone expected this, the fourth Tory Premier in a row forced out over Europe. The only real shock was seeing her heartbreak on show. Now the same deadlock that brought Theresa May down is waiting for the next one.
Well, the numbers have not changed in Parliament. The challenge, the significant challenge of seeing that we leave the EU, deliver on the Brexit referendum with a deal which remains firmly in our national interest, that challenge still firmly remains.
What do we want? Brexit!
The Brexiteers are strong and getting stronger among Conservative MPs and their Democratic Unionist allies. And with Nigel Farage scooping up Tory supporters, pressure for a tough line on Brexit won't let up.
Until we deliver Brexit,
nothing else really counts. If we don't deliver Brexit, there won't be a Conservative Party, so there's no point in talking about other things until we deliver Brexit.
For months, this issue split the country. At Westminster, rival factions are dug in deep.
If all we do is talk about Brexit and we pivot towards no deal, we will not move in the polls, and eventually we will simply hand the keys of number 10 to Jeremy Corbyn.
The riders and runners for leader are off. Expect lots of promises to make up for lost time and get a better deal in Brussels MPs can get behind. But so far, summit after summit, nothing but failure, staying close to EU rules and standards rejected by MPs, including those meant to avoid a hard EU border with Ireland. Today, the European Commission President told German TV, what can someone else achieve that she didn't? And the Irish leader, voting today, is saying Britain could see a general election, a new referendum, maybe a no-deal Brexit.
British politics is consumed by Brexit and will be consumed by Brexit for a very long time. It means that we now enter a new phase when it comes to Brexit, and a phase that may be a very dangerous one for Ireland.
If leadership campaign promises to get a better deal in Brussels fall flat and leaving without a deal is all that's left, there's no clear way for MPs to stop that happening. And with most MPs opposed to leaving with no deal, another constitutional crisis may well be on the cards. So if clarity about Brexit is what Britain needs most, the painful end of yet another premiership may just have achieved nothing at all. John Pienaar, BBC News, Westminster.
Well, after years of tough talks, draft agreements, renegotiations, parliamentary defeats and delays to Brexit, Europe's leaders are now facing the prospect of a new British Prime Minister. Well, Europe's leaders is that resignation going to prompt a change in heart on the part of those in Brussels? Our Europe editor, Katja Adler, is there for us now. What are your views on this, Katja?
Well, Clive, I'd say that it does change things and it doesn't change things. What it doesn't change is the fact that EU leaders remain as fed up as ever with this Brexit process that seems to go on, and a changeover in Prime Minister just threatens to lengthen this process even further. But a change that Brussels believes is coming is that a new Prime Minister will probably want to come here and to try to renegotiate the Brexit deal, particularly that controversial backstop guarantee for the Irish border. Now, EU leaders have said today, absolutely not. They are not going to budge. They feel they've been around that block for the last 2 years, and Theresa May signed off on the Brexit deal back in November. But a concern in Brussels is if the new Prime Minister doesn't get his or her way, they could be tempted to use what one EU diplomat described to me today as dirty tactics, trying to obstruct EU business, like trying to pass the new budget, or they might be tempted to actually trigger a no-deal Brexit, willing to do so in a way the EU never believed that Theresa May was. How the new Prime Minister deals with the EU will affect how open EU leaders are to granting that Prime Minister a new Brexit extension. This one lasts until the 31st of October. And the assumption here is the new Prime Minister will want more time to try to renegotiate the Brexit deal or to hold a general election. But frankly, Clive, right now, EU leaders' focus is on the elections to the European Parliament, because the results of those could really affect important national governments in the EU, like in Germany, France and in Italy.
OK, Katja, thank you for that. Katja Adler there, live in Brussels. Let's bring you some more of the day's other news now. And 2 boys aged 13 and 14 have died after what police have described as a serious incident in Sheffield. 6 children were taken to hospital early this morning after officers were called to a property in the Shire Green area. Danny Savage is there. Danny, what more can you tell us?
Clive, police were called here at 7:30 this morning. Paramedics soon followed and 6 children were taken to hospital. But at lunchtime, police revealed that the two eldest, boys aged 13 and 14, had died. The other 4 children, they're aged 7 months, 3, 10 and 11, had much less serious injuries, and they're not expected to be in hospital for much longer. What happened, we don't know. There was speculation this morning about a shooting. Police had to say there was no weapon involved. They were asked about a possible poisoning as well. Again, they said they wouldn't be drawn on any details about what happened here. A man and a woman in their 30s have been arrested and are being questioned on suspicion of murder. Clive.
Danny, thank you for that. Danny Savage there in Sheffield. Now, 10 members of staff at a specialist hospital in County Durham have been arrested following a BBC Panorama investigation into the alleged mistreatment of vulnerable people. Police say they're investigating claims that patients with learning disabilities and autism were physically and psychologically abused at Walton Hall, a privately run unit funded by the NHS. Now it's time for a look at all the weather news, and Chris Fawkes has the details. Hi there, Chris.
Hi Clive, thanks a lot. We've had quite dramatic skies overhead in northwest England over recent hours. Most of us have seen some sunshine today, but it did turn a little bit cloudier through the afternoon. And talking about cloud, out in the mid-Atlantic, we've got some weather fronts developing at the moment. This lump of cloud goes on to be an area of low pressure that will ultimately push these weather fronts eastwards into the UK this holiday weekend, with the cold front bringing cooler air across the country during the second half of the weekend. For the time being, we've got a few showers around at the moment, but for many areas it's going to be a dry night with some clear spells. For Northern Ireland, cloud will tend to thicken later in the night, and the temperatures, well, it's a mild night, 6 to 12 degrees. So, Saturday morning, we start off with that damp weather getting into Northern Ireland. The rain then spreads into Scotland, where it will turn quite heavy. Further southwards, a lot of dry weather for England and Wales, a few bright or sunny spells, and still feeling quite warm, with temperatures widely into the high teens or low 20s. With that cloud and rain in Scotland, not the warmest of weather here, with temperatures of 13 degrees. For Sunday, we've got our cold front coming through. At least the rain does tend to clear through, the weather turning a bit brighter across the north and west later in the day, and the rain turning more showery as it transverses eastwards across England later in the day. It's late to arrive across the southeast of England, so still quite warm here with temperatures up to 20 degrees Celsius, but the cooler weather will be working in by the time we get to Bank Holiday Monday. So we'll all see a bit of sunshine over the next few days, but rain particularly across northwestern areas and turning cooler as we head into Bank Holiday Monday. That's the latest weather. Clive.
Chris, thank you for that. Chris Fawkes there. Let's get a final thought here in Downing Street from our political editor, Laura Kuenssberg. The starting gun started now. They need to find a new leader and a new Prime Minister. Practically, what happens from now?
Well, we can expect a frantic contest. MPs whittle down maybe more than a dozen candidates to a final two. Then it goes out to the Tory membership only around the country who will have their say. And that result should be concluded by the end of July. But I think it's really worth knowing tonight, changing the boss does not change the dilemmas. And whoever is next in charge here will still face many of the problems and divisions that failed Theresa May.
OK, Laura, thank you. Laura Kuenssberg there, our political editor. Well, that's it. So goodbye from me now on BBC One. Let's join our news teams where you are. Have a very good evening.